There was a lot going on. We had to get the story out, and it was changing minute by minute by minute and getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Tragically, we've witnessed the devastation firsthand.
Honestly, not sure if we're going to have community to go back to.
It feels like it's a never-ending cycle.
That it was like fighting 100 years worth of fire all at once.
The fire crews had tears in their eyes. We can't guarantee an outcome, but we're going to try our best.
You could see the pain in the people's faces and the thirst for the information.
I just want to go home. I'm sure everybody wants to go home.
We have to be committed to improving because the landscape is changing. The fire environment is changing. We have to change with it.
It was the most destructive wildfire season in the recorded history of British Columbia. Fire forced evacuation of tens of thousands of people. It damaged hundreds of homes and structures. And tragically, it resulted in the deaths of 6 members of BC's wildland firefighting community. In the next hour, we'll look back at the unprecedented 2023 season. We'll hear from the BC Wildfire Service, the West Kelowna Fire Chief, who was thrust into the summer spotlight, and the Global News reporters who covered the wildfires, starting with our Romina Dea and what happened in Tumbler Ridge.
Just as the judge was set to begin,
Veteran reporter Romina Dea often covers court cases, but for this urgent out-of-town assignment, she did not hesitate.
breaking news is in my DNA, so I said yes when you need me to leave.
In early June, a small community in northeastern BC called Tumbler Ridge was on the path of destruction with a monster-sized, fast-moving fire. More than 2,000 people were on the move, ordered to evacuate to nearby Dawson Creek.
Just like that, they had to leave because the fire had just exploded overnight. They were grateful that we were there.
They were coming up to us and wanting to talk and wanting to ask questions.
Romina describes the scene as controlled mayhem, with shock and tears all around. She says people were not angry, but visibly upset to be forced from their homes.
So it's been a very uncomfortable transition.
It's frightening to think that you get a knock on the door and you gotta go. There's no time. So you have to leave and you don't know if you're ever going to come back.
At this stage, are people going to get to go back to their community?
From above, the pictures didn't lie, revealing the true force of this blaze and just how dangerously close it was to wiping out their town, a wall of flames just 4 kilometers away.
And there's no amount of water bombing that's going to win that battle when the winds kick up.
The people below were at the mercy of that wicked wind and those flying embers.
You're not going to win against the wind, right? It's like a tornado, a hurricane when you're seeing it from the air.
The fire sort of keeps leapfrogging itself by these embers being pushed out. And just to see it from the air, how lucky these people were, how close it was going, but also the ferocity of it, how intense it was. You could hear the roars of it. You could see how fast it was moving.
You could hear it. Over the blades of the chopper, you could hear it. People thought their town was gone.
And at one point, were you thinking this could be a reality? That this could happen?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Romina and photojournalist Justin O'Kines both say they could not help but feel a deep connection to this tight-knit community, and they shared the moments behind the scenes.
And sometimes they just need a hug, right? To know that, we're there, we got you got any questions, let us know, and we'll make sure they get answered.
Here's your house, Sarah.
For example, stressed-out displaced residents asked Romina and Justin to go take footage of their homes, just to know if their property had been spared from the fire.
We took footage just to send them on WhatsApp. It didn't even make it on the news.
We'd drive up and they'd all be sitting around the front of the hotel, and as soon as Romina would jump out of the car, boom, straight over, and talk.
We need you to go. These winds are squirrely and it's not safe for you.
We're honestly not sure if we're going to have community to go back to.
What was the most frustrating part of being there? Was it the lack of information for the residents of when they could return?
For me, the most frustrating thing is not being able to get in and see the guys doing their work, being held back so far a lot of the time, and then we'd get access every now and then when they deemed it was safe enough. But the crews that were in there, they were giving it their all, and I would like to show that.
Yeah, the bureaucracy definitely is the most frustrating, because people need to see it to believe it. So that's what we're there for. There's this Grand Canyon-sized gap as far as the communications involved.
But those positive moments outweighed the negative because of the people they met. Every single citizen was willing to share their story.
But for me, one of the things was one of the first interviews we did at the community centre, and there's a woman, she's really upset. She's got a baby on her hip.
Please just drop everything and come be with us, because it's sort of stressful.
Her husband had to remain behind. He was the firefighter, and he had to evacuate his family. It was just heart-wrenching.
If it were to happen, it would be absolutely devastating.
And then there are the residents who defied the evacuation orders, putting their community first, staying behind to feed the pets, watering gardens around the neighborhood, and recovering irreplaceable mementos.
This is the banjo that I recovered.
Like that one woman with the banjo, and it's the only thing that she had of her son.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing she cared about, that did not go up in flames.
So you can't hold it against them if they're trying to look after the community and the people in there.
If the town got wiped out, there's nowhere to go. Like, that is such a wonderful town.
Thankfully, the winds ultimately shifted and the rain started to fall, bringing waves of emotion that they could soon return home.
Every time we try and move in and out of the hotel, people coming up to Ramina, 9 times out of 10 crying. When she's going out, lots of hugs, lots of tears. Yeah, that was me.
And you never shared that in your coverage? This is
No.
what viewers didn't see? Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's a special place. I thought it was a special place.
The people of that town love that town.
Coming up next, the unforgettable night of August 17th.
I, at one point, couldn't see how we didn't lose lives.
West Kelowna Fire Chief Jason Brolin takes us through what he and his fire department faced that night as fires ravaged the mountainside, eventually jumping the lake. Plus, coming up later this hour.
For the public in BC, what's important to understand is that response is always going to be there, but the solution to this challenge doesn't lie in response.
BC Wildfire Service Director of Operations Cliff Chapman shares his vision for fighting BC wildfires for the future, where the focus should be for every British Columbian. That's later this hour. One of the hardest hit areas by the wildfires this summer, West Kelowna. The calm amid all the chaos, West Kelowna Fire Chief Jason Brolin, who became the public face of this record-breaking summer. Brolin describes the battle in West Kelowna as the toughest firefight of his career. And it all started with one unimaginable and memorable night on August 17th. All right, thanks, Chief, for letting us come down and chat with you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
You called it the toughest night of your career. What is seared in your mind from that day? What moment stands out?
Yeah, I will never, ever forget, being in one of the most affected neighborhoods, 4 in the morning, fire all around us, and watching the men and women who had come together to fight this fire, digging in and not letting go, and what that meant for that neighborhood, but also what it meant for our community, and it was a great feeling to see them being successful in this one tiny spot, but also just like the overwhelmingness of what that all meant for our community going forward. And
you described it as hell, Armageddon, and you're not exaggerating.
No, somebody told me that night that it was like fighting 100 years worth of fire all at once, and it really was. A lot of firefighters will, not see that much fire in an entire career. And we had the unfortunate experience of seeing it like all happen right in front of us all at once.
When did you know, driving, that you knew this is going to be historic that this thing is going to get worse before it gets better?
Yeah, I think like we knew in the command post, starting to get reports from the field about what was happening and where the fire was burning, and what was being lost and the battles that the firefighters were having on the ground. You know, of course, it came as a massive shock when we learned that the fire had jumped across the lake. That's just not something that normally happens. It's not something that, even in all the planning we did for this event in that short period of time ahead of it, we had never contemplated that would have happened.
How do you defend flying embers when they jump across the lake? A fire jumping off the lake, or a fire jumping across the lake sounds ludicrous, but it happens all because of these flying embers. Are you defenseless at that point?
It's, you know, there's a number of techniques. Some of it just involves being in the neighborhoods and watching for embers and dealing with them when they happen. A lot of it involves advanced preparation if we have the time, but sometimes we just don't. And some of it, you know, like as difficult as it is for the firefighters, is like we need to get out of the way and we need to get safe. And once that fire front passes, then we push back into those neighborhoods and deal with the aftermath. And really at the height of that fire, you know, in a 24-hour period, we were doing that multiple times. We were getting safe and then we were going back. And those were, you know, really difficult decisions.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine for that first night, was there a point where you were actually fearful for the safety of your crew and yourself?
Yeah, I think the whole time. You know, as a chief, like one of the most difficult decisions I can make is to put the people who work for me in harm's way. We do that through good equipment, and we do that through good training, and we do that through good command and control, and you know, I have a great team of leaders every day who are doing that work. But something on this scale, something like of this magnitude, it's a whole different ballgame. And you know, so yeah, I was concerned for the lives of my people. I was concerned for the lives of the people in the community too. Like, I definitely, I at one point couldn't see how we didn't lose lives. And you know, now I see through a combination of, you know, all of the things that were done out there, that's the reason why we didn't.
But now when you look back, are you incredibly, obviously grateful, but as you kind of mentioned, a bit surprised that you were able to save every person?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, we continue to drive through these neighborhoods. We continue to work hard to get people back home and get life back to normal. And I think the more that we do that, the more that the realization comes that, like, how much worse this could have been. It was awful already. And, you know, we're still sickened by the loss in our community. But it's just, it's overwhelming, like, how much worse it could have been. And how much worse other fire chiefs in other fire departments have experienced it as well, not just here.
You really personalized it when you talked about you have a 16-year-old daughter at home that night, not knowing where you were. And you really didn't have time to even think about your family. You're focused on the job at hand. But when you look back now, your daughter was fearful that you could have been anywhere.
Yeah, I found out afterwards, and not just me, this is, I'm sure, every man and woman in my department. But, you know, my daughter stayed up all night and she watched the whole thing unfold. And, you know, technology being what it is, like, she tracked me on Find My Friends the whole night. She knew the neighborhoods that I was in. And I know that, you know, if the 100 people on my department, their families were all doing the same thing. And really makes it hit home that, like, not only were we all out there doing this, but we all had family behind us that was enabling us to go do the things that we had to do, but it was difficult on them too.
And that just set up a string of consecutive days of hard work, long hours for you and your crew. You became the lifeline for this community and the province, to be honest, of what was happening.
Be ready. We may have another scary night tonight.
How did that evolve in terms of being the public face of this disaster?
Yeah, it wasn't something that I sought out or that, you know, we practiced for. But you know, our world got turned upside down in that first 48 hours. Everyone's life came to a stop, not only in the community but also us, and you know, because of just this community and the way we've come about, like, we all worked through this together. My family got evacuated just like a lot of other families, and you know, my world, my firefighters' world got turned upside down just like a lot of other families did. And we all worked through it together, and I think that allowed me to connect with people a little bit. I mean, for me, it was really a luxury. I got to come here to the fire hall and hear everything that had happened that night, or everything that had happened that day. And then I had the latitude to just go tell the public about it. And I was able to be really, you know, open and honest and share some stories. And it was serious business. Like, people lost their homes, but could still, you know, share with them something funny that happened that day. And, you know, like, the stories, there's 1,000 of them and they just keep coming, right? But some real amazing things, like firefighter who came here from the Lower Mainland, foregoing his citizenship ceremony to be on the fire line, and then being able to connect remotely and actually still become a Canadian citizen. And I got to see him that day afterwards and give him a hug, and somebody asked me, like, where was he from? And I said, like, I don't know, but I know he's from Canada. Yeah. And like I say, there's 1,000 stories that happened during this fire because of that.
Coming up next, more on that unbelievable first night in West Kelowna from a reporter's perspective.
It was terrifying. It was scary.
It was a massive breaking news story with both West Kelowna and Kelowna on fire, prompting mass evacuations. The observations from our news crew on scene and their call to stay put to report what was happening. That's coming up next. Thursday, August 17th, was an unforgettable, chaotic night for people living in the Kelowna area. The pictures were unbelievable. So much so, a West Kelowna wildfire photo from that night was featured in Time magazine's top 100 pictures of the year. Gathering video for Global News, veteran journalist Patrick Bell. He, along with reporter Cassidy Moscone, shared their accounts now, what turned out to be a marathon shift of covering one of the biggest stories of 2023.
Yes, yep.
Global News reporter Cassidy Moscone was just a few weeks into the job and new to Canada. On August 17th, she was working on a story in Vancouver.
There's a playground and park just across the road, construction here on the street.
When executive producer Michael Henniger reassigned her to something much bigger.
Around 1 o'clock, I got a text from someone in Kelowna, and it was just a picture of the mountain, and it was all on fire. I had to really take it on faith to send her, because she had just arrived from Australia. It was challenging because she had not spent hardly any time here at all, and you're just literally throwing her into the fire.
I'd never heard of these places before, so I'm Googling it. I'm going, holy crap, it's 4 or 5 hours away.
As you got closer to Kelowna, you could really see West Kelowna was on fire.
Cassidy and veteran photojournalist Pat Bell quickly set up at their location, the only news crew on scene.
And when I got up to Clifton Road behind Knox Mountain, you could really see all of West Kelowna. You could see houses burning. I phoned Henniger right away. I said, are there houses burning? Well, nobody's reported that officially from BC Wildfire. I said, I put the camera and put the Dejero on and said, you look, you can see houses burning. They're burning right now. So then I talked to Mike and said, this is where we're going to go live from.
And he said, go to the feeds room, go to the feeds room, look at this, look at this, look at this. It was the whole mountain was just burning, 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 right down to the water. You could see structures on fire. It was crazy. He said, wait, look at this, look at this. Pulls out and pushes up, and there is another fire. He said an ember had flown across the lake and started a fire 150 meters up the hill from where they were on the Kelowna side of the lake.
You could see it all as it happened. Chaos surrounded them, double-parked cars in the street, as people with their jaws dropped watched the mountainside burn.
It's all very unreal. Are you worried for your home?
If the wind comes this way, yep. I'm worried for all these people's homes. It's pretty sad, so.
What did it feel like, Cassidy, for you entering a scene when everyone else is evacuating a scene?
It was terrifying. It was scary. It was like just waves and masses of people, and if you wanted to get anywhere fast, you couldn't because there was just queues of cars, there were people running.
It's almost like being in an Omnimax theater, and you're watching this amazing footage, and it's all around you, and the sounds and the smell, and the seat behind you then is lit. And the reality, the people they were in that movie. They were now watching, which was tragic, and now they're saying, we could be part of the tragedy. I mean, it could be West Kelowna looking at us.
It was coming down the hill, so that's when I was really concerned.
And at that point, we're having some serious conversations about, are they in the safest place?
He said, I'm relying on you to make a good decision that doesn't, come back to haunt me the rest of my life.
Tragically, we've witnessed the devastation firsthand.
It was a weird situation trying to remember a script in the chaos of all of that, because you're just kind of saying what's happening in front of you.
You're just watching it wipe out that whole side of the mountain.
I think partway through my live hits, we had sirens and cars just racing past us.
Watch this, involve this. What? An amber.
I'll do a piece to camera.
It was basically play-by-play, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like commentating, right? I don't know, you were no longer spectating, we were participants in this emergency.
Remember, this was Cassidy's first experience in the Okanagan, and it was in the dark. She did not know Lake Country and relied on her colleague for local knowledge, like during this pre-taped report.
Car after car, it's been a procession. The traffic has sometimes been gridlocked, but this fire is on both sides of the river now. An ever-changing situation here in Kelowna.
It's a lake, love, it's not a river.
Did I say river?
Come on, just do it again, we're fine.
Okay,
no, you're good, there's nothing wrong with it.
And straight to camera and finished, and Pat says, you said river. And she said, did I? And then swore and said, right, let's do it again. And nailed it.
Grace under pressure in the fields and in the control room. For Cassidy, the most powerful moment, experiencing the aftermath in the daylight.
Homes were reduced to nothing. It was just dust, and you could hardly see any of the devastation. Just breathing through it, you just felt like you were wading through smoke.
Had you ever seen a scene like that before your eyes?
No, I'd never seen anything like this before. It was a wall of flames, and it flattened people's homes and lives. Everyone in Kelowna was so unbelievably kind. They've just had their whole world wiped out to dust, and that was the mind-blowing thing for me. We were showing people their homes through the camera lens. So we were standing on a hill and we were talking to people who had no idea, and they were trying to use their iPhone and zoom in, and they had no idea if their home was still there. And we would say, come and look through Pat's lens, through Mike's lens, and you were witnessing people find out that their home was gone.
Cassidy, what was the most challenging thing for you that night, that first night?
Don't say me.
That night, just kind of trusting that, it's live TV, anything can happen, and you've just got to tell people what you're seeing, what you're feeling, because we were there.
Good morning, Jen. Well, surprise, it's another whitewashed, smoke-filled day here in West Kelowna.
Cassidy delivered 58 different live reports from various locations over 9 days.
Yeah, that was relentless. Every few minutes we were dialing into a different place in the country.
We started to say we need to go back to the room for 20 minutes, into the air-conditioned room, just to get a breath.
Yeah.
Sometimes have a shower, second shower to get all the stuff off, but your eyes burning. It was really hard on your eyes.
Yeah, you just felt like you couldn't escape it. Going in the car, that was all, that was filled with smoke.
We joked about it because I do the drops and then she'd do the drops, and we'd be passing the drops back and forth.
It was our favourite time of the day.
Drop time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, bye.
Wildfire coverage from the front lines is exhausting, emotionally and mentally draining. Cassidy and Pat were able to spark a spontaneous and much-needed moment of humanity after interviewing a local and his dog. They had just found out he had lost everything.
She had gone to the local Walmart and bought a dog bed for this guy's dog. And that's something that never made it into any story. Those are the kind of things that happen when you're in the field and covering these breaking stories. You cannot help but be affected by people's pain, and you cannot sometimes help but get involved. That moment of empathy and compassion just showed for me why it is that we do this. You know, we do this to bring that human emotion to the screen, to viewers, so that they can know it and feel it. And, you know, our people feel it too.
A really uncertain night here, and probably a very sleepless night for the residents and all of those crews here in Kelowna. Back to you.
While fires were spreading in the Kelowna area, there was a major firestorm in the communities of North Shuswap.
It's almost undigestible in that moment.
The scenes of destruction were jaw-dropping. How the communities of that area came together, many defying orders to deliver supplies to their neighbors on the lake. The story through the eyes of Global News reporter Troy Charles is next. Fires devastated communities of the North Shuswap. Not only that, there was a firestorm of upheaval when people in that area defied evacuation orders, putting their community first, and also calling out BC Wildfire Service on some of their decisions. Global reporter Troy Charles shares what he observed during a very tumultuous time.
Got to get through it before it falls. Oh my God.
It was just viewer video at that point that people were sending in.
It was a fast-moving fire in the North Shuswap.
It was just like an inferno.
And reporter Troy Charles, along with veteran photojournalist Tony Clark, were dispatched to the region. And their first stop, Kamloops and the evacuation center.
Right away just went to, just started approaching people in the parking lot.
There was a wall of flames about 25 feet high. And
that fire spread as fast as 20 kilometers in under 12 hours, crossing Highway 1. Troy's second stop was in Chase, a town fully blanketed in smoke, and they couldn't see the flames.
One, we couldn't get into it because the roads were all blocked off to where the fire was burning. And two, it's a giant lake. You know, we're talking to people who are just finding out through photos that their friends are sending them that their entire business burnt down or their house is gone. And then a lot of those people also were kind of taking matters into their own hands, and they were getting their own boat rides through up through Little Shuswap and then into the main lake, and then trying to, even just from the shoreline, just trying to see if their property is still there.
This isn't a suggestion, it is the law.
What was the dynamic like when you hear Bowen Ma saying, please do not defy orders, and people in that community were defying orders?
Yeah, I mean, that was just the reality of that situation. It was like we had this wildfire, and then we had this kind of polarizing aspect of it as well, between those individuals who stayed behind, the government, BC Wildfire Service. It kind of came this contentious issue.
For many, desperate times called for desperate measures. Residents defying orders, loading supplies on and off boats for delivery.
The food is going to get to where it needs to go.
We were there the day that they had this supply run planned, and then it got halted for various reasons. I mean, we were there filming this kind of like little town hall that just popped up when they found out that their truck wasn't going to make it, that they wanted to offload and bring across the lake. And a lot of people were pissed off. They started just loading up their own boats, taking their own generators, fuel, water tanks.
We'll find our own way. I don't care if we got to paddle over in a raft.
Basically, they weren't taking no for an answer at that point, and they were gonna, you know, help their neighbors across the lake.
Here between Scotch Creek and Solista, just below Squylocks, Anglemont Road.
Was it challenging for you for coverage, access? You got yourself a boat?
We just befriended a guy at the boat launch in Chase, and we just asked if he would, the next day, if he would just take us up, just even along the shores, just so we could get shots of the destruction. That day that we went on the boat, it had been confirmed through BC Wildfire that they weren't doing any aerial water bombing because the smoke was so low.
My friend lost her home here.
And then it just so happened that we had someone in Solista, a lady, who had messaged into the station saying, you know, I could be interviewed. And I called her and I said, I'm right on the shoreline right now. So she drove down, we parked the boat right on the rocks, and then we got into her car, me and Tony, and she drove us around, and that's when you see I think some of our most compelling images for sure.
They had a 3-story home.
Armageddon in there. Houses on both sides of the road for a while just totally burnt to the foundation.
I got singed. My arms were burnt.
In our regular job, you might go to a single house fire, and and it's devastating, but that's your whole story. Is this, one house is burned down, and now you come into a town where there's hundreds of homes that are burnt to the ground. It's almost undigestible in that moment, especially in our line of work where the deadline is always lurking. And then it's not really till later that night where we're back at the hotel watching the story on TV and seeing, what we witnessed that day, where it really kind of like has more time to kind of wash over you and realize like this is not normal, and it's horrible.
Troy also witnessed the heightened emotions of the aftermath, with locals questioning the controlled burns conducted by BC Wildfire and also complaining about the lack of communication.
And it was a lot of he said, she said. BC Wildfire says, oh, we're up in the hills, like we have lots of guys on the ground, you just can't see us. And then the people in Scotch Creek and Solista, they're like, we don't see you. We're here putting out spot fires in our friends' properties and around town. And seeing that kind of squabble, obviously, in most cases, they're going to be on the side of their community members that are there on the ground.
There's always armchair quarterbacks and scrutiny. Is that frustrating when you hear locals saying, yeah, that plant ignition was wrong, or I'm going to stay in my community and defy the orders? How frustrating is that from a wildfire service standpoint when you're trying to get a job done and you have your naysayers?
This kind of new era where armchair quarterbacks, as you say, have an ability to put their story out there, and so they should have that ability. I think for us, it's really about ensuring that we're telling our story, which is the facts of what's going on the fire. And sometimes those facts are not pleasant. And so being able to lay out the facts and educate the public on why that is and what that means, and the attempts we'll make to steer that fire, those are hard truths to tell, but they're important truths to tell.
Troy says the gathering of those facts and footage, reflecting the sentiments of the residents and the overall uncertainty, made it one of the most challenging assignments of his career. But what was certain? The resilience of the people impacted and their love for the community.
I think it's like that across BC, across Canada, but it's even more highlighted in these small towns where these folks have grown up with each other, and they have that camaraderie. And when a disaster like this happens, it's second nature. They don't really have a choice. They're going to be there for their neighbor. But yeah, it's just good learning experience, and also just you got to tell those stories, and someone had to be there, so I was thankful to do it.
Coming up next, we'll hear more from BC Wildfire Operations Director Cliff Chapman in an in-depth conversation about the future of fires in our province.
We need to make the right choices for now, but also for the future generations.
The inspiration behind Chapman's profession and his message to all British Columbians on what needs to be done to prevent a repeat of the 2023 wildfire season. We chat with Chapman next. Like many Canadians, he had dreams of playing the NHL. Instead, Cliff Chapman chose a livelihood of fighting fires. He now has the top job for the BC Wildfire Service, working closely with the Premier and other high-level government officials on strategies for fire prevention and mitigation. Chapman describes 2023 as the heaviest wildfire season of his career, and is promising the service is always evolving and adapting, and will open dialogue so groups can work together to find solutions with the changing landscape.
Yeah, so this is our provincial air attack coordination center.
It's mission control for Cliff Chapman, where he oversees aerial deployment, strategizes attacks. This is the operating system for response. And Chapman's passion for this line of work has been burning since he was a teenager.
You started at 17. What was their attraction?
Yeah, well, I grew up with a single mom and a brother, and there was a program at our school through our social studies department which was called Become a Junior Firefighter. And my mom said, hey, Cliff, you should be a junior firefighter.
He quit hockey on ice for battling BC forests on fire. And after 22 years with the BC Wildfire Service, Chapman says he respects the power of fire now more than ever.
So our map was just like a Christmas tree of reports. So this map was blowing up on August 17th. And you look at years like 2023, where our staff probably broke every record we've ever had in terms of how many days they spent on deployment. The thing that jumps out for me is the loss of life. Something that we have never experienced to this level. Fire line fatalities for BC Wildfire Service, something new for our organization and very impactful. And our people had to try to grieve while also trying to respond and be there and do what we asked them to do to protect BC and its landscape. So I would certainly say this was the most challenging fire season in my career.
As we head into winter here in Kamloops, there's a lot going on behind the scenes at the BC Wildfire Service headquarters. They take a 12-month holistic approach. And Chapman says the focus is always to evolve, adapt, and learn from the previous summer, even more so after the historic 2023 wildfire season.
What we're seeing is a changing landscape. We're seeing new hazards and new risks associated with the landscape changes, whether that's the drought that we're continuing to see, whether it's the heat waves that we're seeing summer after summer, and then obviously once fire's on the landscape, what is that interface between those fuels and the wildfire environment? One thing that we've made a big investment in BC Wildfire Service is our predictive services unit. When it comes to seasonal forecasts, we look at sort of some of those climatology metrics in terms of drought. Is it an El Nino season? So are we going to see the ocean temperatures rise or fall? And those have all proven to be pretty good indicators of what the fire season could be. Obviously, it still has a huge impact what we get in June when it comes to rain. That's the big indicator, but there's a bunch of yearly indicators that we also watch, and we were watching those going into this last fire season. And we knew that it had the potential, if we didn't see rain in May and June, that we were going to be set up for a very challenging year. And that's what happened.
What also happened, ember transfer. Those flying embers that allowed fires to jump the lakes. Chapman admits it's extremely difficult to stop them when it's happening, and it's leading the way in what's causing neighborhoods to burn.
When you look at West Kelowna or you look at the Shuswap, those embers were landing everywhere. And so for us, working in close partnership with municipal fire departments, it really becomes a search and destroy mission, which I know doesn't sound all that advanced, but without being able to forecast where the embers are going to land, you really have to wait for them to land to go in action.
We get a lot of emails still to our newsroom about, what about the water bombers? Are they useful anymore? Are they effective, or have they become kind of irrelevant now? What's your take on the water bombers?
Yeah, so I mean, I think specifically you're referencing the Martin
Coulson's,
Mars,
yeah.
Coulson Aviation. The Martin Mars played a pivotal role in firefighting in BC for many years. Yeah. But like anything that sort of becomes front and center, there's been adaptations, there's been innovations in this space, and so there are a multitude of aircraft to choose from now. BC Wildfire Service over the last few years has been going through a modernization project, slowly but surely looking to modernize our fleet of air tankers, and the Martin Mars was not part of that fleet expansion. But as we have gone and gotten our own skimmer groups, so smaller aircraft that come in groups of 4 or 8. We had 8 this summer. We have 8 going into next summer as well, and those are in support of our retardant-based aircraft. For the public in BC, what's important to understand is that response is always going to be there, but the solution to this challenge doesn't lie in response. It's really about prevention and mitigation. It really is about risk reduction and building resilient communities. From people's back door to the backcountry of BC, we have to have a holistic approach to managing the land base. We have had historical practices in BC for 100 years that said suppress all fire, generally speaking. And so we have done a great job of suppressing a lot of fire in BC over the last century. That has led to some challenges with where fire is naturally occurring in BC and has been for thousands of years, and Indigenous communities were all over this for thousands of years. Utilizing fire as a management tool is going to be something this province needs to have a long, hard look at. We've got some work underway trying to introduce a more robust cultural and prescribed fire program so that we can when it's cold and a little dreary like it is today, and like it will be in the spring of 2024 and the fall of 2024, utilizing fire to reduce the risk on the land base is an imperative tool for us moving forward.
Let's go!
Let's get out of here.
When you're dealing with so many different municipal departments and it's so different from Kelowna to Revelstoke, what's the biggest challenge when you're working with locals?
Yeah, I wouldn't frame it so much as a challenge as I would frame it that we have a primary mandate to keep our staff safe and to keep the public safe. That is our priority. Now, obviously, beyond that is the priority around fighting the fire and ensuring that the losses are minimized. But our top priority is protecting responders, which is inclusive of volunteer responders. And so the key for us is knowing where people are and knowing that they're trained to do what they're being asked to do. That's what we're really focused on working through, is making sure that we have those right steps in place so that when they are under the command either of BC Wildfire Service or the local government, that they are safe.
What do you think about Daddy's job? It's all right.
It's good.
How are you able to balance, especially in the summer, of being a dad and working whatever it is, 18, 20-hour days? How do you do it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I guess, I had this reflection, Jason, just last week. I was thinking about my job and my kids. And it was the reflection of my work having an impact on my children and on this generation of children. Because this generation of kids that are my kids' age, which are 6, 8, and 10, their memories of summer are far different than your and my memories of summer. My memories of summer were going to Skaha Beach in Penticton and just doing summer things as a kid. I don't remember smoke in the air. I don't remember fear. I don't remember anxiety about the fire that's burning up on the mountainside. And so there's a real passion for me to obviously show up as a father, but also apply that to why I do what I do and why this organization is trying to do what it's trying to do, which is maybe not for this generation of children, but at least to start for this generation and then the subsequent generations that follow, to try to get back to summers that aren't filled with smoke and inside days, that don't have canceled camping trips and family vacations. Mm-hmm. We need to make choices. That's what we control. We need to make the right choices for now, but also for the future generations. And that is going to be, a continued energy and investment into prevention, mitigation, and risk reduction, and really getting everyone in BC to understand the challenge that we face and how they can contribute to the solution, how we can all contribute to the solution.
Tens of thousands of British Columbians were impacted by the fires this season. Hundreds of families lost their homes.
It's destroying. It's terrible. I have a hard time doing this, but.
Just ahead, the story of the Finley family as the McDougall Creek fire not only wiped out their property, but also their livelihood. How they managed to save all of their horses from the blaze when we come back. For a West Kelowna man, it has been months of depression and despair after his family lost pretty much everything after the McDougall Creek fire. But the one big positive, they were able to save all of their treasured horses. Here's Jeff Finley's story of resilience, loss, and love.
It's the house and the acreage.
Walking through the ashes, the harsh reality has set in. The raging inferno not only destroyed the Bear Creek home and surrounding property of Jeff Finley.
It was burnt to dust. Looks like Mars, like a nuclear bomb was dropped in there.
It also wiped out his livelihood in an instant.
It's kind of maybe a weird way of saying it, but they are like my children to me, and it's so hard for us now.
For the past month, Finley has spent his days visiting his treasured herd of horses in southeast Kelowna. He saved every single one of them from the McDougall Creek fire.
My biggest concern was, how am I getting 20 horses out of a fire zone?
You can save our place. That will be truly amazing.
The fire was closing in over the ridge. With the help from friends and trailers, the horses all got out on time.
Say goodbye to our house.
What's left? The charred remains of the family's popular horseback trail riding business.
I did not burn that.
We have 600 acres that we lease from the government with 20 kilometers of trails that we've groomed over the years, and they're all ruined. Our trees are all dead. The trails are not safe, so our business is done. So he came over to say hi.
And now he's been forced to sell off the majority of his 20 horses to avoid bankruptcy.
There's no way I can carry this every month. It's just destroying. It's terrible. It's I have a hard time doing this, but I retired from the police force in 2015 with a severe PTSD, and this place has been my sanctuary. It's been my place where I've been growing and actually getting over, you don't ever get over PTSD, but the emotions numb after a while, and my horses do that for me. So watching it burn, it's terrible. We were in the Delta Hotel for 2 weeks.
Finley's family and workers are now living out of suitcases at his friend's house. A small but large consolation, Finley still has one more surviving animal to tend to on his property.
Mother Nature came in and said, not the pig, because there was an eye of a hurricane there that burnt around her. Grass is green. She got a little bit of second-degree burn to her side, I think from radiating heat, but she's totally fine. When the helicopter went in and airdropped her some granola bars because nobody could get in there, so she actually got the first feeding was from a helicopter dropping granola bars on.
Most popular pig in BC.
Oh, I guess so, eh?
And while Pumbaa has become a symbol of joy and resilience, the reality of the situation is these are tough times for his community with difficult goodbyes ahead.
Now I got to say goodbye to most of them, but I'm going to keep the ones that are real important in here. And he wants another cookie. He's 16. He'll be with me probably another 14 years. He's not going anywhere.
But sadly, most of them will. But Finley will ensure every one of his prized possessions will find a good home, and he's just grateful they all survived.
He always got such a beautiful smile. The humans, we easily can save ourselves, right? It's just horses. They rely on us, and they don't know where to go in a fire. They would, if they stayed behind, they would all perish.
Finley says the plan is to rebuild on that property and will be pivoting to running horse therapy programs, and we wish him all the best. That's it for our BC Wildfire Special. Thanks for joining us. Happy holidays, everyone, and a special thanks to our first responders around the province. Here's to a safe and manageable wildfire season in 2024.